Hey guys, today I'm going to go over how to program a Racepak Smartwire. I made a video on wiring one and how to lay out everything previously, so watch that video first and then get into this one if you've got an issue and you're trying to program your Smartwire. So right here on this screen is data link software from Racepak. If you've used Racepak before, this looks familiar. If not, what this is a car configuration. So what I've already done is I've plugged into the Smartwire, and when I plug into the Smartwire, what I do is I unplug the two main connectors and I just leave the battery power hooked up to it so that none of my outputs try to activate when I don't tell them to. So unplug your two main connectors, leave your power to it. You can do this on a bench if you want to, and click the read button. What it'll do is it's going to read all VNet configurable channels, right? So that is all of your output wires and also all of your input wires, or if you have a switch panel on it. This current car that I'm working on has the rocker switch panel with one momentary button, and this button is going to be used for the starter, and then it's also going to do double duty for the nitrous purge. So that's all done in the programming, which hopefully we get to. So what I like to do is write on a piece of paper 1 through 8, just like this, and write down next to, 1 starter, 2 ignition, 3 fuel, yada, yada, yada. So you have a reference point to go back to. If you're watching this video and wondering what a Smartwire is, this is a Smartwire. So this is a power distribution module for your car. This powers everything in this car. So the only other relay in this car is a solid state relay for the nitrous progression that's ran through Holly. Everything else is ran through this Smartwire. So let's get into the programming side of things. If we look at the instructions, I know this is very taboo, but in the instructions, it comes with this piece of paper that tells you what the pinout is, right? So this is two 23-pin connectors on the Smartwire, and you have input pins. So there's the A connector and the B connector, and they're labeled. So as you see here on the sticker, this one's A, this one's B, so you know what's what, right? Just like I explained in the previous video. And you have pins numbered here and what input channel they are. So in the previous video, when I explained how to wire this, I showed you writing out 1 through 23 and writing down next to it what the function is going to be and what color wire, the length, what gauge, yada yada. We're taking that piece of paper, it's sitting right next to me. You can hear it. But we are taking that piece of paper and we're going to transfer that into actually programming it. And then this is another view of the keypad or the switch panel that's in it. So the first thing that I like to do is I like to program the switch panel first, because all of these outputs are going to need on conditions, and it's a lot easier to name everything first. So we're going to right click on SP1 switches, and it populates this screen, and it lets you know, this is the switch panel that it found during its read all, right? When we clicked read, it found this switch panel on the VNet bus. So we're going to name all of these here. So we're going to name this one starter, this one here. And we're going to have to come back to this screen, so we can program the little LED lights up here. So I name them, I actually screwed this up, should be SP1 starter, SP1 ignition, SP1 fuel, bear with me here, SP1 water, SP1 N2O enable, SP1 lights. Actually, I'm going to change this. I'm going to make it marker. And then, because it's just going to be the marker lights. SP1 is headlights, oops, and SP1 dome. All right, so if you were plugged into the Smartwire at the moment, you could hit send configuration and it would update the Smartwire and save all of those labels. But we have a bunch of programming to do, so I like to do it all at once and then send the configurations. We click OK, and now we're going to program the SM1 inputs. And what these are the hardwired inputs. There's 12 hardwired inputs. If we look here, it's these input channels, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on this connector, 6 on this connector. So these are our hardwired SM1 inputs. So we right-click SM1 inputs, and here they are. This is the input name, right? And the pin location. It tells you this is on A10. This is SM1, switch 1. And then you can change it. Is it a ground trigger or is it a 12-volt trigger? So we'll go through and label all of these. So for right now, what I did was I made these blank and just called them ECU1, ECU2. And the reason we're going to do that, whoops, I screwed that up. Look at that, ECU. Pay attention to the pin location. Don't just go straight down the list. And what we're going to do is once I finalize all the things that I need the ECU to turn on automatically, I'll come back in here and change the names. But that'll be done in the Dominator, the outputs from the Dominator to trigger those things. So ECU2, and then I named everything in the Dominator as well. So we have a bunch of spare outputs from the ECU to the Smartwire. A12 is ECU3. Bear with me, I'm not the fastest typer here, contrary to what you may believe. And this is important because when you're going through all the output setups, which is the most critical part of all this, you'll need to pay attention to what you're doing. So that's why it's easy to just name your inputs, because all of your outputs are going to turn on based off of an input. So B10 is neutral safety, and then B11 is bump start. So that's this car's got a couple of little momentary push buttons throughout the car to check valve lash and whatnot. And then 12 is line lock in. So that's coming in from the line lock button. And then B13, whoops, I screwed that up. Look at that. Brake switch and line lock. See, I got to pay attention. I don't get everything right all the time either. And then we've got B14, which is ECU7, and then B18, which is ECU8. So now would be the time to change these from ground trigger or 12 volt. So you should know when you wired it what's what. So these are all voltage triggers. And then this we'll have to go back and look at in our software what's what, but I'll come back to that, later. So we've got them all named, okay? Now it's time to start programming our outputs. So if we click on SM1 output 1, and before we click on it, what we should know is if you have this paper printed out, you can look at output channel number 1 is actually pin A3. So when I program these, I do it a little bit different. I right-click this, and you can change the channel name. So right here it says pin A3. We can change the channel name. And when we look at the channel on our paper that we wrote down, I do this. I go A3 fan joined. So there is 2 outputs to turn on the fan. And because the fan has a pretty high amperage draw, you can set a fuse current and a maximum current allowed through the channel, and you can change it from constant on to flash, latch on, single pulse, whatever you want to do. So the reason I do fan joined is so that I know when I program pin A1, I'm going to label that fan. So if I make a change to the fuse current on A3, I better make a change to the fuse current on A1 because both of those pins have wires coming out of them and going to the fan for the power side of the fan. So once you've named it, come in here, go to your on condition, and this is why we set up our inputs. So we're going to go here, and if we look, the first part of it is all of your outputs. But if you scroll all the way to the bottom, let's go to SP1 switches. I want water. So we right click. So when SP1 water, which is switch, the switch panel for water, the cooling switch on the switch panel, when that is turned on, we want to turn on that output. So we hit OK. And then you could send the configuration, but I'm going to do all of them at once, and then I'm going to send the whole config over to the car. Hit OK. Now let's go to, let's say 6. I just want to show you. Oops, I'm looking for A1. I should probably follow my own advice. So pin input channel, pin A1, or I'm sorry, output. Pin number 1 is output channel number 4. So we go over here to output number 4, A1. So we're going to make this one A1 fan. We're going to go to the on condition. We're going to scroll down, go to the SP1 switches, and we're going to go to water. Right click, water. So something else we can add in here. Remember we had all those ECU inputs, right? So what we can do here is go to SM1 inputs, and here's all of our ECU inputs. So we can say, whatever your input is, we'll just call it ECU3. We could right click in here, and we can add, if the ECU tells it to turn on, we want it on, right? So the ECU is going to turn this on, and so is the switch. So you have the option of doing both without having to, put any diodes in line or anything. It's all in the programming here. So we're going to, what we will end up doing is populating all of these to turn on and off the way we want them, and with switches or from the ECU. And when you're all said and done with this thing, it actually makes life a heck of a lot easier when it comes to wiring a car. And it also gives you the ability to modify how things work, right? So Purge, this is the question that I'm sure all of y'all are going to ask, right? So we're going to go, let's do the starter. That's the one that everybody's going to ask about, because I mentioned about using the one button to do two things. So starter is on pin 4, A4. So starter A4, output channel 11. It's on A4 and A5. So 11 and 13. So let's go to 11, right click. This is A4. This is going to be A4 starter. All right. I'm not going to change the on condition yet. And then we're going to go to here, A5 starter joined. All right. So there's our starter. Now let's go find our purge. Okay. So purge is on A7. Refer back to this. Pin 7 is output channel 15. And don't ask me why they did it this way. I don't know. So A7 purge. All right. We need to be able to disable the starter over a certain RPM. And then we need to enable the purge over a certain RPM, right? Or maybe with the N2O enable switch on. So let's set up this purge. This is how I would do this. We'll go to on condition. Now we're going to say we're going to have to add the SP1 switch of starter. We need to add the SP1 switch of N2O enable. And we need to add the SM1 input. We're going to just grab ECU1, okay? So, I'm sorry, and we also have to add SM1 input neutral safety. So there's a couple different ways to do this. Starter button is equal to 1, and neutral safety, this is for the purge. Remember, we're doing this for the purge function, right? Neutral safety is equal to 1. Well, we don't want it equal to 1. We want it less than 1, which means it's off. So you see that it's a less than sign, right? So if we hit the starter button and the neutral safety is not made, it is now the purge button, okay? That's a simple way to do it. So anytime it's out of park or neutral, it will be your purge button. So that means if you go to start the car, when it's, it's not running, if it's not in neutral or park, the purge is going to activate, not the neutral safety. So maybe we want to add another safety to this, right? So we'll go right click, we'll say starter is equal to 1 and the N2O enable button's on. So that's a pretty common one, right? So the only way we want to purge it down is if the nitrous enable switch is actually on. So that's how you can do one function with the starter button. Now let's go to the starter output and do the reverse. So you go to your on condition. We're going to go down here, SM1 input. We're going to do neutral safety. We're going to do SP1 switches starter. We're going to do SP1 switches N2O enable. So the way this will work is starter is equal to 1 and neutral safety is equal to 1, right? So now it's got to be in neutral or park, and then the starter will work. We can also say the only way it's going to start is if N2O enable, let's change that, is less than 1. So now the only way the car is going to start is if the starter button is pressed, the neutral safety is equal to 1, as in park or neutral, and the nitrous enable is less than 1, which means the nitrous enable switch has to be off. So the car won't start if the nitrous enable is on. So there's a couple different ways to do this, and you can use your imagination. You can add a lot of different operations in here to make it safer or easier to remember. You can also make it, what we need to do is, we'll do this since we're on the starter. Let's go SM1 inputs and bump start. So now our bump start, those are our bump buttons underneath the hood so that we can, bang the motor over and use it to check valve flash or start the car up underneath the hood, whatever you want to do. So bump start is equal to 1, and then N2O enable is less than 1, and neutral safety is equal to 1. So now we have the same functionality with the bump start button, but we didn't interrupt this functionality of the starter button on the actual switch panel. So hopefully that makes sense in how you do this. That's about, one of the more complicated ways to go about it, but I figured if I show you the hard way, you'll be able to figure out all the rest of the easy stuff first. So hopefully that answers a lot of the questions on how to program this. And if you got any questions, feel free to comment. Let me just make a comment about that, right? So YouTube comment section is interesting to me. I check it about once every 2 or 3 weeks, if I remember, or when it comes time to make another video, like when I post this video onto YouTube, I'll check the commentary and reply to some stuff, ignore some of it, whatever it is. But YouTube commentary section is not the best way to get a hold of me or to ask me a question. And don't get pissed off if I don't reply to your comment on YouTube. It's just not, it's just not the way to go about it. If you really had a concern or a question, or you really wanted, you wanted to purchase something from me or whatever it may be, we have a website, we have a phone number, we've got all that kind of stuff. We're on Facebook and Instagram and yada, yada. There's other ways to do it. YouTube comment section is not the solution. So just a little tidbit. So anyway, hopefully this answers some of y'all's questions. I love the Smartwire. I put these in just about every car that I can. There's really no real limit to what this thing can do, as long as you are smart enough to understand how to program it. So, all right, see ya.